Hi, everybody. Welcome to Boswell Book Company's virtual event series. We'll be starting in just a moment while we get folks in. Thank you for joining us tonight for this special event that's gotten even more special in the last 15 minutes. So I'm Daniel Golden, the proprietor of Boswell Book Company. It is day 4,458 of us being in business. And we are featuring tonight Jonathan Evison, the author of Legends of the North Cascades. I know this was billed as an event with Johnny in conversation with his good friend Benjamin Percy, author of The Ninth Metal, and up until 15 minutes it was. But unfortunately, there's been a last-minute transportation issue, and so that is not to be the case. And hopefully, Mr. Percy will come back later on, maybe for the next book. As you know, his new series is a trilogy. So we'll see how that goes. But what that just means more time with Jonathan Evison.
Lucky you. All righty. And there goes all my material talking about Ben's book with him too.
We can put up, like, I can draw Ben Percy and we can just ask and he'll be, the thing is you'll probably stump him with most of your questions. So Evison's the author of All About Lulu, West of Here, The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance, Lawn Boy, and the new novel, Legends of the North Cascades. And I've been told that he has like 2.5 more books already written. I guess we'll hear a little more about that later. But we don't really care about those books now. We care about Legends of the North Cascades, which has been winning raves everywhere. A library journal called this a modern back to the land story that feels like John Krakauer's Into the Wild meets Gene M. All's Clan of the Cave Bear, a combination which makes me think that it came up at a party.
Quite a mashup, huh?
Yes, that's right. Like, can you do this? A combination that makes for compelling reading and its appreciation of the monumental properties of nature and recognition of the history of humans in the North Cascades. And Booklist wrote, Evison masterfully delivers subtle yet pointed commentary on how society marginalizes veterans and how we profess to admire yet distrust the individualist ethos while offering a profound meditation on the human spirit. Those are good quotes, but they all pale in comparison to Boswell's Kay Roswick, who writes, Dave has sustained significant psychological damage from 3 tours in Iraq. When his wife dies in a car accident, he has few options to support himself and his 7-year-old daughter. Unable to retain a job and about to lose his home, Dave decides to apply the many outdoor skills he learned and loved as a child. He and Bella move to a cave in the North Cascades wilderness. Life goes reasonably well until winter approaches, when family and individual rights are pitted against society's expectations and laws. I close the book with a deeper understanding of people who live at the very edges of society where life is fragile because so few viable options exist. This is a wonderful adventure story spiked with relevant social issues. I promise you that this event could go in just about any direction. And the first direction is for me to hand it over to Mr. Evison. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for having me. I really wish I could be with you in person. I love Boswell Books. Milwaukee's always one of my favorite tour stops. I've had some epic and long nights closing down the bars there afterwards. Great meals. So thanks to everybody who joined me. Sorry that Ben couldn't make it. We just got a text like 15 minutes ago. His flight was he had a connecting flight or something that got canceled, and so he couldn't make it. I'm sorry about that because I was looking forward to talking about his book, The Ninth Metal, which I'm really enjoying. Ben's a great writer, one I really admire and respect, above all else, because like myself, he's a grinder, man. I mean, he's the only writer I know that works as hard as me. Like, the guy is always writing, always working, always pushing, trusts in the process and just grinds it out. So I'm going to encourage you, normally I think how these things are run are, often they'll have it a run of the show where I'm supposed to read at you and yap, and then we open it up for questions. But given the circumstances and just the medium itself, I find that I'd rather just, if anybody's got any questions at any point, just type them in the chat. So since we don't have a conversation partner in Ben for me, I would invite you to be my conversation partner. So don't be shy. It's not a live event. Nobody's going to see you. But if I happen to say anything that you want me to extrapolate on, or if you just have any out of the blue questions, please hit them up, and I'll just address them off the chat. I want to apologize for a couple of things. One, if I stroke out on you, it's because I'm up at my place in the mountains and I don't get internet there. So I had to come down the hill to my friend Bob's house, and I'm doing this from his sunroom. And it's like literally 105 degrees in here. So if I start turning really red or anything like that, I'm wearing all black too. I mean, it is hot in here. This is like my third event for this book. I'm still sort of developing a facility to talk about it. Daniel provided a brief synopsis there. I guess I would just start talking about how this book was different for me in a lot of ways. I mean, the process is never the same for me with each book, but one thing that has been pretty consistently there for me, because I deal with heavy subject matter. I deal with a lot of tragedy in my work, but there is generally comedy right there side by side by it. And I lean on that comedy because it helps me get through some painful material. I didn't have this with this book. This was not the tone of this book. While the narrative is playful in its structure and things like that, I didn't have the humor to lean on as I normally do. And Dave is going through some pretty dark times. Dave is a character who is, suffering from PTSD, who's done 3 combat tours in Iraq, who's really not doing well mentally, and is left to make some very big decisions, and maybe does not make the wisest decisions. And having to live inside that character like 12 to 16 hours a day, 3 days a week was actually really pretty tough at times. I would have been, because I have 3 kids, I really have to compact my work week into 2.5 days. And so like, I just have to hit the ground running, and I have to give myself up. And anybody who's a parent will understand that when you're a parent, you have 3 young kids, you don't have a lot of me time as it is. So, sometimes it's nice to sometimes you got to go to the bathroom to get some me time, essentially. And so when I get out here to the cabin to start my work week, it's really hard to not just want to sit there and procrastinate a little, just to gestate and have a little time to myself, but I can't. I have to immediately get out of my own way. And in this case, crawl inside of Dave and Bella. And I don't want to give you the idea. It's a very hopeful book, actually. It was a hard process for me to write and resist humor. It's what I wanted to do. It's the tone this book deserves. But like as a process, it was actually sort of emotionally draining to me. We'd love you get. Here's a question. We'd love your questions. Okay. Hi everybody on Zoom. God, it's awkward. It's like bad 90s public access TV, and I apologize for that. I look forward to a day when I don't have to look at everybody's dead house cats and or dead house plants and their cats, and we can all be in one room together, and there's beer. I have my beer. Wait, I'm hoping this is a question here for me. Too bad Percy skedaddled. That's not a question. Help me out here, people. I don't want to read at you, and I don't want to just talk at you and give you spoilers about the book. So also, I don't want to bore you with craft. That really just leaves me with answering the questions that are not there. So let's go, people. Anything to get me going. Tell us how you came up with the book. Well, that ought to eat up a little time. Actually, my good friend John Paul, who's a poet who lives in Brooklyn, he grew up really rough in Montana, like really rough. Like, I mean, they were poaching on the side of the highway, stuffing deer carcasses out of season into the trunk of their cars. And I believe his father had a bunch of rabbits in the basement, and he'd just give him a buck knife and say, go down and get dinner. And he'd have to go down and catch and skin a rabbit. I mean, this guy grew up really tough. And he once told me about a guy who named Dave, who went and took his wife and his kid to live in a cave in Montana. And the guy became kind of a legend, like Cave Dave. And that's what this book was originally titled, was Cave Dave. So that was the initial inspiration for the book. It's set in Washington. I didn't know what was coming in terms of the pandemic. So, the fact that self-isolation is the major theme of this book is either just a coincidence or maybe I'm prescient. I don't know, because self-isolation is the theme of this book. And actually, it's a theme I've returned to numerous times in my work, because I find that it's a theme that's really just sort of ripe with drama, because you have this, all these dichotomies, being alone and being together, community versus the self, all these inherently tense, dichotomies. And so, as far as the, it's two parallel storylines. Okay. It's basically about parents, single parents raising kids. And in this case, the two sets of parents are Dave and his daughter, Bella. That's the modern story. But then there's another half of the story that takes place 16,000 years ago in the late Pleistocene, with a single mother raising her boy on the Cordilleran ice sheet. And I like bifurcated timelines. I've done 120 years before. I've done 170 years. But I thought, why not really swing for the fences this time and do 16,000 words? And when I was writing these late Pleistocene characters, I remembered something Carl Sagan said when I watched Nova as a kid in the 70s. And I'm just paraphrasing. It was something along the lines of how the human mind and the human brain has not changed in something like 120,000 years. And we still have the same faculties and the same emotional capabilities and so on and so forth. And so it was fun to write these late Ice Age characters with a little bit of a modern slant. I was raised by a single mom, so I know that relationship between a son and a single mom from the earliest days of my youth through being a teenage. And so it was really sort of freeing because you think, boy, how do you write a caveman? Are you gonna make up a language? And actually I did, and I about 200 words of a language that was phonetically consistent and so forth. But then I got rid of all of it, except for maybe 2 or 3 exclamations throughout the book that were just atmospheric. It was just too obtuse. You know what I mean? It was a fun exercise, but that's out the window. So really, they just talk pretty modern, and the dynamic between parent and child is also pretty modern. Did you do any hands-on research for this book? Did you try living in a cave, or is it all from your imagination? I have slept in a cave, but I was drunk. I wasn't there for trying to do my survivalist thing. I have spent a lot of times by myself in the backwoods camping, mostly in the Olympics. I've done many, multi-day hikes over the low divide and the high divide, and so I spend a lot of time in the backwoods, and it's always been a little bit of a fantasy. I have decent survival skills. I'm very aware of a lot of other survival skills that I have not mastered myself, but I'm aware of them enough to write about them. I know what they I know how to write about them. Let's put it that way. So no, I didn't live in a cave. No, I never lived in the late Pleistocene. In terms of writing outside my purview, I mean, the big one here was writing a combat veteran, because I am not a combat veteran. And so, whenever I write outside my purview, I lean really heavily on some readers that I hand select that have lived that experience. So I did have a number of Iraq veterans who helped vet everything. I would send them everything. I would send them, when I first started, a lot of the research happens as you're going along. And so when I first started, I'm just kind of winging it a little because I know what the feeling I want for the book. I know what I'm trying to create. I can start to tell this story without letting the research get in the way. But then, I knew that it needed to be vetted because, I remember looking at this. It was like a New York Times expose on the nomenclature of the Iraq War, and so I found all these nifty terms, listed out that sounded like that were supposedly insider technology or insider, not technology, but terminology. And so I would slip one of those in to sound like I knew what I was talking about sometimes. But then I sent him my friend Paul, and he's hilarious. And he did 3 tours in Iraq, and he'd be like, what the fuck is it? Whatever. We don't call it that. It's called a this. Or he'd say, he really vetted me hard. He was very funny. He'd write notes in the margin like, this sounds like a fucking Navy Federal commercial. Come on, man. I mean, he pushed me really hard because the fact is, anybody who writes or anybody who reads knows that it really only takes one false note to lose a reader. I mean, you can't afford to hit any false notes, and this becomes a very dicey proposition when you're writing so far outside your purview, whether just experientially or by 16,000 years. So the onus is on me to really get it right, and for that I depend on people that do have experience. For instance, with This Is Your Life, Harriet Chance. Obviously, I'm not an 80-year-old woman, but you know who is? My mom is, and she was born the same year as Harriet, and I'm familiar, since she's my mom, with her sort of cultural lexicon, and I've heard her stories, and I knew how it was for her in the working environment in earlier eras in the 40s and 50s, and so it's invaluable to have. Book research only goes so far. The best research is really talking to people who have had the experiences or going out and experiencing these things themselves. Which, whenever I can. Like, for instance, I did take the Alaskan cruise that's in Harriet Chance. And in retrospect, I think I might have been able to fake that one. I could have looked at a blueprint of the ship and said, okay, the Lido deck's here, and here's where the pools are located, and these are the different lounges, and this is what they have at the buffet, and this is what the menu. I could have maybe talked to a few crew members. But the thing is when I went on the cruise, I knew immediately that there's just these little gems that you won't get doing book research. Like, for instance, nobody told me there was a Purell container every 30 feet, everywhere on the boat. The things were ubiquitous. Of course, they don't like to talk about that in the literature, the pamphlets, because people start worrying about a GI breakout on one of those things, and they're not going to go on a cruise. So just little touches like that you can't get them out of a book unless it's like a personal. Sometimes I've used like first person. I'll go to the Historical Society and find these little first person diaries, basically, of people who lived in the 1880s or whatever. And sometimes it'll be like literally like 8 pages of a barn dance where some lady's writing down everything. So-and-so had a gingham dress on and her hair was put up this way, and it'll go for like 4 pages like that. I got a few questions. God love you. Thank you. Let me look at them. Your work shows a facet. This comes from Kurt Baumeister, whom I happen to know, and I'm going to plug real quick. Kurt is a novelist who wrote a book called Pax Americana and just finished another novel, which was originally called The Book of Loki, but I think he changed the title to Twilight of the Gods, which is a great title. But he's a writer to watch. I'm really excited. Kurt and I have become friends over the last couple of years. And anyway, this question comes from him. Thanks for coming, Kurt. Your work shows a fascination with the American idea of manifest destiny. Do you see the modern evolution of that doctrine informing contemporary history, and more specifically for legends, Dave's struggles? Wow. In a word, I'm not sure. That's 3 words. I'd have to think about that one. Like, I thought about manifest destiny a lot in my next book, which comes out in January, Small World, which is all about that subject. I think it's always there, sort of in the fabric, this idea the American individual. I mean, so much of that is tied up with the westward movement of American culture. So I think it's in there in the fabric of Dave, mostly couched in this idea of the individualist spirit. Like I didn't politically, you know, I kind of know where Dave stands on the spectrum, but I just leave that up to my reader to decide. Dave just comes at the world from his very specific point of view, and he doesn't talk about politics. But I think that he occupies a very interesting place on the American political continuum. If you read the book, you'll understand more. Larry Johnson, maybe the basketball player. That would be awesome if it was Grandmama. Hello, Larry Johnson. Love the book. Got it a week ago and couldn't put it down. Finished yesterday afternoon. Really like how you wove current issues into the book. How much of the current world? So many binary reactions. Some thought he was a cult hero and others a nut job. Really easy to have empathy for Dave and Bella, even though I might have seen some of his reaction to the. Okay, this is. Thank you for the reaction to the book, Larry. The question I would glean from this is, there's a, for a lack of a better word, we're going to call it a Greek chorus in the book, which is essentially made up of family members of Dave, people who live in the town, people who went to high school today with Dave, various social workers. It's quite a cast of people. And the reason they're there is to sort of paint a different picture of Dave, to see how this community once adored him and how now he's almost a curiosity. He's like Bigfoot out there to some people. But to his family and to his friends and those who have known and loved him, these voices are like a force trying to pull him back into society. So what we've got is, now we've got a bifurcated timeline with two parallel stories running 16,000 years apart, one of which is very ambiguous. We don't know if it's real, if it's hallucinated, if it's a extension of Bella's own trauma. I know, and actually there are hints in the novel about the true nature of the relationship, but for much of the novel, the reader is sort of tasked with figuring out the nature of this relationship. And then there are the quotes, as I say. So it's a really, I'd like to think it's a pretty big canvas, but I think, I don't think it reads like an overly ambitious book. You know, I don't feel like it, like something like one of my earlier books, like West of Here, Small World, is just so sprawling that it sort of begs, people talk about it as an epic. It's always, the conversation is almost always framed that way. In certain ways, this novel is very epic, but it feels at the same time very intimate. And part of the challenge is, when you have two sets of people living in isolation, was to open that world up bigger so that it didn't become suffocating. Were there other serious contenders? Do you find it, okay, Legends of the North Cascades is a great. Were there other serious contenders? Do you find it difficult to come up with the titles? Oh, the title. Yeah, I liked Cave Dave, but of course, a lot of times they don't like my titles. My titles are, I remember they really fought me on the Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving. And I understand that because it sounds like, to the marketing department, it sounds like a guidebook and that you're going to find in the health section. But for me, that was the perfect title for the book. And I'm proud of the title, The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving. Of course, when Hollywood got their hands on it and Netflix made a movie, they just shortened it to The Fundamentals of Caring, which is, kind of a drag, but at least it was close enough. They could have called it, Roadside Distractions or something, and I wouldn't have made any of those royalties, and not as many people would have found themselves their way to the book. So the book was originally, all through the early working drafts, called Cave Dave. And then when it really started to open up, and I really started to play with this idea of legends in terms of the oral storytelling tradition of Bella and her mother, and also of the cave people, like how their history was passed down. And then this idea of Dave being a legend, first a legend on the football gridiron and just a beloved son of this small little town in the North Cascades, but then later in the novel, a legend is somebody who went to Iraq and came back kind of damaged, and then finally is this legend because he's like a boogeyman who lives up in the woods. Once I opened it up to that point, there was only one title for the book, and that was Legends of the North Cascades. Did you intend to have the message about citizens' limits on their freedom, living options, or is that a personal interpretation on my part? No, I mean, that's a part of Dave's ethos, for sure. You know, Dave, without giving any spoilers, when Dave goes out to live, he's basically squatting on national forest, which is, in Dave's conception, belongs to everybody, because it is national forest. And by the letter of the law, that's supposed to be the case. But there are all kinds of there's all kinds of rules. You can't stay in one place for more than 2 weeks. And they were really, you know, I mean, they were really dug in there. So Dave is often pestered, not often, but on a number of occasions pestered with law enforcement, child protective services, people, unwanted visitors just won't seem to let him be alone up in the mountains. And, you know, he's 9 miles from town, and it's still not far enough to, so yeah, I included those as a part of Dave's ethos. Not that I feel, I don't feel personally my freedom limited that much. You know, I live in the back of, you know, my house abuts something like 5,000 acres of national forest. I feel like I could probably go out there and live. Nobody would ever find me. I get lost out there sometimes. Luckily, a lot of the trails that nobody but me really goes on. Once in a while, I'll see some, you know, a couple road apples. Somebody's been out there with a horse, or I'll see some motorcycle tracks. But I've been lost out there a number of times with the bears and the cougars, and luckily the trails usually loop around because I think they were originally logging spurs, so they like to be able to move things in circles or something, I guess. What's my favorite book I've written? From Brett Starr. I know Brett too. Hello, Brett. Thanks for showing up, buddy. I don't know. The one I'm working on at any given moment, to be honest with you. Like, since I've finished this book, I've already, you know, my next book's done. It publishes in January. And then I finished my next book after that, which is a Western called Last of the Californias. That's already finished. And I'm halfway into this book that deals with reincarnation called Again and Again. And I guess at every juncture, I would say it's just sort of necessary for me to be that excited about the work. So like whatever I'm working on, that's my favorite book. I always feel like I'm doing my best work. And honestly, I do feel like I get better every book. I mean, I learn so much. I mean, I try to reinvent myself and develop new tools every time I go out. I want to push myself and challenge myself because I want to play in a high stakes game. So I'm learning all the time. I mean, there's a possibility I've lost something too, you know, some bushy-tailed, bright-eyed idealism from the earlier works, maybe a little bit less. I don't have, I had a sort of hyperbolic tone saying all about Lulu that I don't know if I would be capable of anymore. That was very colorful and alive and poetic. I don't know that I would be moved to write that way again. They're also different as well. I mean, I could answer the question, what is my most ambitious book? And I would say probably Small World or West of Here. You say, what's my funniest book? And I would say maybe Lawn Boy or Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving. But I definitely can't pick a favorite because it literally is like, choosing between your kids, and you just don't do it. Here's one from Daniel. This question is a little crafty. When you write a dual narrative, is you're able to jump back and forth between the two, or do you write each one and splice it together? Also interested in what other changes you made to the manuscript besides eliminating the language that you made up. Okay, I like this question because when you're doing two timelines and using them as a call and response, I've seen it done before and I can feel it when I read it. For instance, even one of my favorite books, Cloud Atlas, which I love. But when I read that book, I knew immediately when I finished it, I thought, you know what? Mitchell wrote these 6 novellas and then he nested them, or five or six novellas, and then he nested them. I could just feel it because I saw a lot of what I felt were like missed opportunities for connectivity. And that's what's going to happen if you just write one narrative line at a time. when in reality, what I'm trying to create is this conversation between the two epics. So I wrote that I wrote it in a linear fashion. I would jump as I went along, and it's a big jump. But to me, the characters, though they're 16,000 years apart, they're so intimately connected because I mean, these characters are at one with Bella's. Bella is experiencing these characters, so it's always it's always with her, even in the scenes when I'm just writing about her and I'm not writing with them. And so it really wasn't difficult switching back and forth. Sometimes you have to go back and make sure you don't want to be repetitive, or you don't want to. It's funny, I've heard from a few readers that are like, I started to skim some of the Ice Age stuff because, look, I mean, it's a big white Cordilleran ice sheet. I'm sorry, it's not, if it's not exciting enough for you. I thought it was a thrilling adventure myself. But yes, and other things I got rid of. There was initially a lot more voices of these. This Greek chorus was bigger. I tried to pare that down because I wanted to use the ones that I felt most effectively served the story. And I think it didn't take 20 of them to get the point across. And I think so I probably narrowed that down to 10 or 12. And other than that, the book sort of, another thing I would say about the book is it will surprise you. I can almost guarantee that you won't know where it was going. And part of that is because I didn't. I mean, I did initially. I had an outline and I had a plan for this book. But as so often happens, when you get out of your own way and get inside the story and sort of give yourself to the characters and let them navigate the narrative landscape, I found a way more interesting story, and one that I was much more compelled to tell. And yet, because I didn't start the book this way, it was sort of a serendipitous usage of misdirect, which is something I'm really fond of. I mean, I think it's one of the greatest tools in a writer's belt is playing with the reader's expectations and creating expectations for the reader, because it's a partnership. It's a dance between the reader and the writer, and the reader's got to do everything I'm doing backwards and heels. And so when I write now, which is much different than when I started 20 years ago, I'm much more aware of the reader, first of all, and that doesn't mean I'm thinking of the 25 to 64 female demographic. I just mean the reader, me, on the other end of this thing. And I really am more aware of the story purely as information, because I want to use that information as much as possible to make that dance with the reader is good. And so misdirect is really big. If I can create an expectation and use that to later surprise the reader, we all love that as a reader. We love to be surprised, especially if that surprise, if we can backtrack it and see how we were duped and see how that felt inevitable. So I don't think this book winds up where anyone really thinks it's going to wind up, but it has the advantage of having this momentum of feeling. I'm going to give away too much if I talk too much about it. Here's another one. And thanks you guys for this. Is so much better that you guys bringing me some love here, some questions. The Ranger was really an interesting character. He had the tough challenge of enforcing the rules, yet there was a streak in him that wished he could be Dave. He really had to analyze whether or not this living arrangement harmed or enabled Bella. How much of your childhood are your own kids in Bella? Awesome character. Okay, this is a really good question. I mean, the fact that I have 3 kids, really, and they're all precocious like Bella. They're all very verbal because, dad's a writer. They watch a lot of adult movies. But to be honest with you, I'm a little bit of a helicopter parent because I love them so much. And, my sister died in a freak accident on her 16th birthday. And so I've seen how fast something like an accident can happen. And I can see how the loss is irredeemable and the damage is irreparable. And so there's not a minute of the day when I'm parenting that I'm not aware of that. I'm always like under the, when my kids are climbing the tree, I let them climb, but damn it, I'm standing under there. I'm always, always within a couple arm lengths in the pool. I'm always with them there when we're crossing the street. I'd like to think that I'm not overprotective. I'm just being careful. I let them, I try to open them to as many experiences as I possibly can. I want them to be curious and adventurous. And I think I've done a good job of balancing that. But it was really hard to write about children in peril because it's a nightmare for me, you know. And in this book, I'm writing about two children that are in near constant peril, and that was super difficult. As far as my own childhood, it's amazing I survived it. I started going to the city by myself when I was like 8 or 9 years old, just walking up and down First Avenue, going to the comic shops and stuff. I started doing drugs and alcohol at way too early of an age. I mean, I was touring in punk rock bands when I was 14 years old. My mom had no idea where I was for weeks on end. So I really had no parental monitoring. My dad had left when I was young, and my mom had her hands full. You know, she had 4 other kids, including some teenagers that were keeping her busy. So I just kind of flew under the radar a lot. And I was a bit of a latchkey kid. And so as a result, I was very independent. And I sometimes wonder if I'm robbing my kids of their independence by facilitating so much for them. Because, you know, what happened with me is I matured really quickly. Part of me never matured. I'm still a kid, but like, you know, I started cooking for myself really early. I had my first job bussing tables before I even had a social security card. I bussed tables in Pioneer Square. I got paid in tips. I was 12 years old. You know, by the time I was 13 and 14, I had a punk band. I had my own magazine. That's where I really started writing. Was I had a punk fanzine where I would do record reviews and show reviews and interview bands and things like that. And I think the fact that I didn't have all that parental monitoring really allowed me to blossom in a lot of ways. I hope that my kids do the same, but like really, it's more important for me for them to be safe, at least for the 18 years that I have any modicum of control over them. So we'll see. Thank you for the question. Parenthood is one thing I never get tired of talking about, man. A constant challenge. And by the way, we just finished 15 months of remote schooling, which was hellish. And yesterday was the last day. So we're all up at the cabin now and we're just totally stoked. Kids get to stay up till midnight now. No more getting up at 7 in the morning. No more 8 Zooms a day. So we're really stoked. The Ice Age interludes are great. Those readers were wrong. Thank you. I agree. It is, I mean, I guess I could see where somebody might think it's a little monotonous, but the Cordilleran ice sheet goes on for thousands of miles. It tends to be a little monotonous, but there is all manner of predation out there and dangers. So, I mean, to me, the stakes are always so high. I mean, to me, those sections read like a Jack London story, and I never found Jack London. I found Jack London to be the like pinnacle of adventure for me. I grew up reading, you know, White Fang and Call of the Wild and To Build a Fire. And so, I mean, it was really fun for me to write like a big snowy adventure like that, because that's a real sweet spot for me. I love Jack London. I mean, I revisit Call of the Wild almost yearly. I mean, I've read it to all of my kids. You know, I feel when I read that book that I actually get in touch with the wilderness of my spirit. And so when I write something like this, when I write about the natural world, I want to hopefully make somebody out there feel that as well. You know, I want to compel them to get out of the house and get into the backwoods and really, you know, even people who, you know, anybody who's really been out of the backwoods by themselves, it can be pretty creepy. I mean, you know, there's a lot of bears out there, and like there's a lot of unknown out there, and just to have one other person to talk to is, you know, such a comfort. But doing it by yourself, I would recommend for just about anybody to go by themselves and do like a 5-day walkabout by themselves, because you will come out the other end a more expansive, more confident, more capable feeling person. You will spend a lot of times scared shitless because you hear things and you're just in a little bivouac tent and you're no match for a 700-pound bear, or who knows, Bigfoot. You know. So somebody says, I'm a planner and a pantser. Yes, this is true. How much will the Cowboys beat the Seahawks by next season? Double digits, Kurt. Double digits, my friend. Nobody's going to stop this offense, and our defense is solidified. Anybody else have any more questions? We still got some time here. Anything to kind of get me going. And, you know, as you can see, I can go for a while. Sometimes I just need a prompt. Seeing if I missed any here. Well, I'm going to talk about where I'm at right now, which is I'm really overloaded, and it's, you know, sometimes it's a hurry up and wait proposition in publishing. You know, I mean, I've gone 2 and 3 years before between books. I'm always, you know, I'm always grinding away. I'm always 1 to 3 books ahead. I always doing the work, but sometimes, hey, there's a deer in the yard. Sometimes I will have to wait just because the publisher's schedule puts the book out for a time, and the waiting is agonizing. You know, I've had to wait 2 years, 2.5 years before for a finished book to reach readers. And that's really painful for me because completing that circle with the reader is what it's all about for me. I'm not writing in a vacuum, you know, I'm not writing to edify myself or really edify anybody. I'm writing for that connection with the reader. And the book isn't good until somebody reads it. I mean, I can, you know, until I have a sort of test audience for all the effects I'm trying to create, you know, what am I doing here? I am literally writing in a vacuum. But now I've got 2 books coming out in 7-month period, which is just nuts, because the way publishing works is like your galleys kind of go out 7 months before so like all the pre-pub stuff is ramping up for the next book. And now I'm in the middle of this virtual tour, which I will say is a lot less hectic than a normal tour. You know, at least I'm not, you know, closing down a bar every night and getting to the airport at 7:30. And, you know, I mean, it's been easier on me that way, but I do feel like 15 months of Zoom, and I'm pretty Zoom fatigued, as I'm sure many of you are. Do you think you will ever write anything that reflects your crazy teen years? I'd like to read that. My agent has been after me to write a musical memoir for a long time. So for people who don't know, when I had mentioned I was in a punk band called March of Crimes when I was 13 to about 16 years old. And, you know, I played some of my old bandmates. I started the band when I was 13, and I'm kind of a footnote in Seattle music history for having kicked Stone Gossard out of my band from Pearl Jam. Obviously years before Pearl Jam, and we're still good friends, and it's, you know, it's something we joke about. It just wasn't a fit. And then Ben Shepherd was our guitar player, and he went on to Soundgarden, and just really, there was only about 50 people, it seemed like, in the Seattle scene in the early 80s, and everybody ended up blowing up into rock stars. And then, you know, some of people like me became writers, and, you know, people like Charles Peterson, who's like a noted rock photographer, and Harold Hollingsworth, who's a noted painter. And it was just a really great zeitgeist. And I was in the process of sort of planning to produce a documentary about that era. I don't want to write about it because I know myself, I'm too hyperbolic. I don't believe in nonfiction. I mean, for me, it's all fiction, because as a writer, I got to write it as best as I can. You know, I want to tell the best story I can. I don't want to be limited by, you know, something as pesky as facts or history. Also, you know, there's always the risk of blowback, political blowback from your friends. Like, I don't remember it that way. So I don't really trust myself to do it. I trust myself I've written a couple things for music publications and things like that. And I've written about that era in liner notes I've written some liner notes for Sub Pop and Loose Groove and other labels that you know, release records that are you know, apropos to that. So I do like to write about it in kind of short form, but yeah, writing about my teen years, I don't want to write about anything I really lived, you know. I write, they say write what you know. I say write what you don't know, but use what you know. So like, there's a lot of autobiography in my book. All my books, you know what I mean? Like Dave's love of football is my love of football. All that football knowledge comes from me. Or you know, in the Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving, I did work as a professional caregiver for 5 years, and I really did. You know, one of my clients was a 18-year-old kid with muscular dystrophy, and so that was a real relationship. Or in Lawn Boy, you know, I was a landscaper for years, and Freddie's sort of based on a character I know, and like a lot of stuff comes out of your life. But the things I find that I use most is just the knowledge I accrue from experiences, from different jobs I've had. You know, I've used so many of my jobs. I've named landscaper, caregiver, radio. I've used radio, and then things that are just so intimately connected to me because I love them. like I mentioned football before. My next novel is going to be about boxing. I don't know how, but I want to use my passion and my knowledge of boxing. Any kind of knowledge is so valuable because the readers want knowledge, and I noticed that if it's something you know because you're passionate about, you just know it so much more than if you go out and read 40 books. You know, we all know the feeling of the information dump. You know what I mean? Where you can smell the coffee on the author's breath because it just feels research. That it's just this balance of how many details and which details to include. And you can always tell when someone's done a lot of book research, which is exactly why it's so valuable to write from a knowledge that is a personal passion of your own, because you know it inside and out, and you know where to draw the perimeters in terms of what is truly the important information to share. And also it tends to weave itself thematically into your life. So there's like this interpersonal quality to it. It's not just a subject. I mean, I baseball, football, boxing, I eat, sleep, these things are a part of the fabric of me. So when I write about them, I feel like they come alive on the page more so than if I just wanted to go do a bunch of history on ancient Iran or something and then turn it into a book. And at some point I'm actually doing that for a different book, but it's just a different process. And one I don't like doing, I'm not, my friend David Liss, who is also a novelist who writes a lot of historical fiction, or used to. I think he writes for Marvel Comics more than anything now. But back when I first started writing west of here, which required a lot of book research and interviews, all kinds of research, really. But I was getting a little overwhelmed, and I asked him, when do I know to stop? When do I stop researching? Because you could just go on forever. And he gave me some of my favorite writing advice I've ever gotten from anybody. And he said, which really just jibes with my whole ethos, is like, stop when it starts getting in the way of the story you want to write. And that is always my MO, is to write a great story. And that great story is always, no matter how different my books are. And I pride myself on my dynamic. I think my books are very different, each one. A couple of them have more in common with some than the other, but I pride myself on the fact that, I just want to tell a good story, and that they all have one thing in common, and that's that they're all character driven at the end of the day, because Guinness, paid advertisement, paid placement. What was I saying? I was talking about, I forgot what I was saying. Somebody can remind me if this happens. One of the reasons I hate myself, and there are many, is that when I do this, I can't edit myself. I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. I frequently overshare. I say inappropriate things, and all of that's solved on the page. That's when I'm on the page, I'm my best self. I really believe that, and that's why I write. I love it. It makes me a better person. I can edit myself. I can refine myself. I have no self-control when you have to deal with me on this level, which, there it is. Hi, Daniel. I can see you again. Is there a reason?
I've been here. I've been typing. We want you to novelize your punk rock days. Don't make a memoir. Use the knowledge. This is what you told us that you do. So
okay.
Fighting for it.
It is, but the problem becomes the characters, because they're going to be less than amalgams. They're going to be actual people, and
they don't have to be.
This is an interesting question, though, because I can't name 4 good rock and roll novels. It's kind of interesting. Like, it seems like, I just don't read a lot of great rock and roll novels, and maybe that should inspire me to write one, but I don't know what it is.
Okay, what about Visit from the Goon Squad?
I didn't like it.
Are you gonna trash that? No, we gotta get you.
I didn't like it. I wanted to, when I got to the 43-page the PowerPoint thing. I wanted to throw it across the room. I admired much of the writing, but having grown up into the music industry, I know every false note, and I don't know. I think that one of the reasons is that it's hard to write a rock and roll novel is the same reason why rock and rollers don't age well. It's a young man's game. I mean, I'm sorry. I love the Rolling Stones, but I don't want to watch a 74-year-old Mick Jagger up there in spandex pants, rooster walking across the stage while he's singing about starting me up. And I mean, rock and roll is essentially about a young man's concerns: fast cars, sex, puppy love. It's really all couched in the original sort of Chuck Berry incarnation. Whereas Willie Nelson, who sings about adult problems, singer-songwriters who write about more adult problems, they can get up there at 80 years old and somehow they're not diminished. Am I weird in thinking this? This is what I think, that it's hard to write about rock and roll, because unless I'm going to write like, I'm just going to be bringing so much of the adult to I don't know, dude. I don't know. Maybe I'll take it as a challenge. I got 4 more novels on the hopper. I'll put that behind.
Yeah, it's like this. You'll be writing this novel in 2037 or something.
Yeah, because I've already got Again and Again, and then after that, I'm going to write The Greatest, which is my boxer novel, and then after that, I've got Grim and Barrett, which is my novel about the parallel lives of 2 dentists that take very, very different paths through life.
Now, they're dentist novels. That's a genre that's not too popular.
I've always been obsessed with teeth. Like I've always I can't remember what a person's hair color is. Like when I was in radio, my radio partner would be sitting there and he knew this about me. It's a strange idiosyncrasy. I don't know. I notice a certain thing. I key in a certain thing with people, and often it's their teeth. But he would say, "Hey, what color is Eric's hair, our producer, a guy we work with every day." And I'm like, "Blonde." He's like, "Dude, his hair is black." I'm like, "No way. The guy's blonde. I mean, he's not dark blonde, but dirty blonde." And then 5 minutes later, Eric would come in and he'd have black hair. For somebody who prides himself on being a blotter, who describes things I would like to think really well, really nails characters, my observations tend to be very focused on a few things. Teeth are one of them. I've always been obsessed. So the idea of Grim and Barrett was that I just Grim is trying to sort of speed date and online date, and every date is just like there's some deal buster, whether it's an occlusal on 6 or things are going great until he saw some plaque build up or something.
I thought of the Joshua Ferris, To Rise Again at a Decent Hour. There's a dentist novel.
And also McTeague, Frank Norris. Remember, McTeague is a dentist, sort of a barbaric dentist in 1890, but.
Well, so there's definitely room for another one, so that's good. And boxing novels. Did you read
see if I can live that long?
Did you read The Knockout Queen by Ruthie Thorpe?
I did not. I've really read very few boxing novels. My pal Willie Blotton wrote Don't Skip Out on Me, which is about a young, struggling amateur boxer. And of course, the James Welch book, Fat City. And then The Harder They Fall, Bud Schulberg. And that's about all the boxing books I've read.
It's not quite really a boxing novel, but it's sort of a boxing novel.
My attraction is just the language of boxing is so, it's got such a colorful nomenclature. The language comes alive off the page. I mean, like the names for the combinations of punches, or how that left jab is a rangefinder, or it's stiff, or it's straight, or there's just so much. I could just write about boxing all day without any story, just because it's it's the ultimate in action writing. And I really, the older I get, like I said, the more I appreciate writing action, because it's a lot more difficult than people realize to write really good action. I think that's something Ben and I would have talked a lot about. I mean, because it's something that we're simpatico. I mean, we're not afraid of writing action. We relish it. And that would have been a fun conversation, which we will have another time.
One day you can have a conversation with Joyce Carol Oates. She loves boxing.
She loved what book?
Joyce Carol Oates. She wrote a whole book about boxing.
Did she? Well, I mean, she says she's harder to keep up with me. She publishes a book every year. Like, I mean, that's the model. I mean, her, Joyce Carol Oates and Stuart Onan, and then God, somebody else that just has like 30 books. I forget.
Yeah.
Alice
Well,
Hoffman.
we our hats off to you. Looking forward to the next 7.
Well, thank you for jumping in on this, Daniel. You told me you couldn't do it, and here
I
you are.
couldn't. Well, you had said the reason I jumped in is you said I'm going to really embarrass myself. I'm going to say something I regret. And I'm like, well, we're just about time to end it. So I can do this before you get to that point.
Before yeah, I've still got 3 more beers lined up here. So you're in good shape.
Well, you can save them for after. So I did want to note that if you click on any of the links, including, of course, a copy of Legends of the North Cascades, you can buy it from us or your favorite independent bookstore. You have, I assume, you were at Bainbridge Island, so they probably have actual signed copies. If somebody wants one of those, I'm sure they can get it to people. You can buy, there's links to White Fang and Called the Wild, Deer Pests, Deers in the Yard, or a little notes about your punk band, proto grunge band, I should say.
You have book plates now, right? I sent them to you, right?
We have book plates, yes.
So you have signed books. Buy them from Daniel.
Book plates are great, but I'm always jealous of the store that gets the actual sign.
Yeah.
So,
well, I signed 1,100 of them, and I decided 1 per 100 says "fuck off," just to be playful. So if you go into the store and they've got multiple copies, and you want that special one,
it's collectible. We'll find it for you if you want it. So,
I want to thank the folks that showed up, and I apologize, for Ben on behalf of Ben. Please check out his book, The Ninth Metal. I'm like 60 pages in, and I'm just tearing through pages. It's really, it's what I expect from Ben. It's great action. The language is right on point. The characters are like really well drawn for sort of an action adventure animal, where characters tend to just be, so often central casting. His characters are really good. I mean, he's got the chops, and I really look forward to the conversation. We'll catch up, but I wanted to thank y'all who did show up for the event.